And now a very special treat for all of us here, and I hope all of you there, as we welcome my very old friend Dave Whitlock to the show, who's going to tie something very special for us.
Now wait a minute, you mean old friend or old friend?
Yes.
There's two different meanings.
Yes. Well, we've been friends for at least 25 years. And,
okay, that's better. Okay.
I think we satisfied on both accounts.
I have to admit on both accounts.
I've been trying to ease gracefully into geezerhood, and I think I'm losing the battle, but judging by the three white heads that are sitting here, we've been around.
We can't fake it anymore,
Can't fake it. Well, Dave, you're going to show us tonight a waking minnow.
Yes.
A surface fly that's a great smallmouth or largemouth bass fly.
Anytime a fish wants to chase a minnow, it's a nice little fly to use right on the surface because it makes a little V-wake on the surface, and you can also twitch it a certain way or use a sink tip and get it to dive, too.
And it would be good in either lakes or streams.
Yeah, so it's a good cripple minnow.
Cripple minnow pattern.
Imitation.
What are you going to use to tie it with?
Well, I tell you what. First of all, I'm going to start off with a nickel-plated wide-gauge bass hook on size 10. And it's got a micro barb on it.
That's what they sometimes sell as a stinger hook?
Yeah, I call it a stinger hook. And I like the nickel plate because it blends with the color of the materials real well. Plus, you can use it because this fly is good in brackish and saltwater too.
Sure.
So use that. I'm going to use some heavy white thread, nylon thread, to tie with. Now, the tail or the body part of the fly, I'm going to use some yellow variant and some grizzly. And then for some flash in that tail or body, some silver flashaboo. And then for the head, which gives you the buoyancy and the shape of the minnow, I'm going to use yellow, gray, and white deer hair. And also, I'm going to put a little snag guard on them because when you want to throw it in around mangroves or weeds or lily pads where these fish live, the nylon monofilament is important for that.
Okay.
And then to kind of make it look good after the mess I tie, I'm going to put these beautiful eyes on the head of it, and that'll give it some personality. And those are holographic eyes, and we're just going to use the chartreuse color on them.
Great. Let's do it.
All right, let's rock and roll. Well, as always, I believe in making a barbless hook because it's a lot less painful on the fish and you both when you're removing it, and also it hooks better. You know, I mean.
Oh, sure.
So I bend the barb down with my jaw. You can also use pliers, but to me that's just another reach that I don't need to do. And it's sure better to go ahead and bend the barb down before you tie the fly if you haven't already bought a barbless hook, because then you don't forget and get the fly tied and then start to bend the barb down or find it in you and have your barb. So
you know, you have to be careful doing this because just last week I caught a steelhead, landed the steelhead, it was barbless, and in taking the fly out of it, the point broke off.
Yeah.
That's how close I came to not getting that fish. And if I'd have ticked that thing on a rock behind me, it would have been gone. Right. So you have to exert some care and caution when you're squeezing these barbs down.
Yeah, you do. And so the jaws are just perfect. That hardly ever break a point.
I actually don't care if you do, but I put that in there so people would know I actually caught a steelhead.
Oh, sure. Okay. Is he this way all the time?
Most of the time, I'm sorry to say.
All right, back to the tying thing. I'm going to take a file and I'm going to roughen the hook shank a little bit. And I really believe this gives you a little bit better thread and material and glue adhesion to the hook shank. And I've been doing that almost on all the flies that I tie for several years now, and I've had good results with it.
Now, you don't find that in salt water that then causes the hook to rust where you've done that?
What I'm going to do, that's a good question. I really didn't take that much off, but if I did, I'm going to replace it with some of this waterproof super glue here.
Okay, good.
And it acts just like epoxy, so it's next thing I'm just going to attach the thread at the bend here. And before I go any further with it, trim off the little tag here. And then I just coat right over the top of this hook shank or along the shank with the waterproof super glue. And then that's going to replace the finish, plus really weld this thread to the hook shank. So I just wrap that up forward like that.
Gives you a good underbody to work on.
Yeah. Now the next thing I'm going to do is to take this nylon, and I'm going to take a strand about 3 or 4 inches long. I'm going to loop this around the hook shank right behind the eye so that a strand of it goes down the right and the left-hand side of the hook. And I call this my body base foundation. It adds a lot of durability to the fly you tie because it won't turn on the shank if you tie the fly over that. Then I just cut off the short end like that, take the long end, cut it, mash it flat with a pair of pliers, and then I tie that right in behind.
On top of the hook?
Right on top, yep, and then down for a snag guard. And then when I'm finished, this is going to be around here, and Then I bring the thread back up. And I might as well size it too. So I just run it through the eye, and the loop should come down about approximately half the hook gape. If this was, say, a 1/2 inch, I'd make this come down about 1/4 inch.
Sure.
Size it right there, and then just bend it a little bit like that, and then trim off the excess of that.
Now, one point I want to make, you basically used 2 pieces of mono, but you tied it in as one and then cut it and did it to save some steps.
Yep. Yep.
But essentially you were using 2 pieces of mono, one to
Well,
widen the hook and one to
That's right. Yep.
make the weed gap.
Or 2 steps of it, yeah.
Yeah, but
Then
you
I
s-
flatten the end of that, and the reason I do that, Leroy, is because when I stick it up through there and tie it down, it's so much
It's already
easier.
flat, you
And
bet.
it won't pull out. But if it's round, it'll pull out. Plus, it's just, if you've ever done that with bass bugs, it's really hard sometimes to force that little filament down. Then I just coat over those thread wraps, and that's just like putting 5-minute epoxy on there. Man, it makes them, it just really does weld the shank and the nylon down. Okay, the next thing I want to do is to start tying the fly. And I'm just going to take, first of all, some of this nickel or silver flash shabu, about 10 or 15 strands of it. This will add a little nice little flash. And right in that area right behind the body foundation, I'm just going to attach that to the bend and pull it back about the length and a little bit more than the length of what I want the tail. So we'll make it about that long, okay? Now those are going to flash and move in the water nicely. It looks like the minnow. Then I'll take a couple of these little yellow tree hackle, and I like to choose these feathers where they're fairly soft. You know, not like dry fly hackle. This is just, I think that most companies refer to this as Chinese game cottoneggs.
Or some places sell it as soft hackle.
I guess you could call that because it's almost all web. Yeah.
Or hen hackle.
Yeah. And then I just take and cut those at the general length I want, and I'll splay one out to the right and one out to the left. Just a little long. Let me shorten it.
Now you're holding those both in the same hand, but you're only tying them in one at a time.
Tying one on one side,
Okay.
and then I turn around and put this on the other side, and I splay them out so that they'll have a little bit more kicking or swimming action. And see how that is up on the camera there. And what I do is I don't strip the stem. I just lay it on there, make a couple of wraps, and then tighten it down and hold it right where I want. And because if you strip the stem and you try to tighten as you wrap, they'll twist
It'll
around.
roll.
Really,
Well, it strengthens the whole structure, too.
Yeah, it makes me look good. when I hold it.
Rather than tie it in by just the stem,
Yeah.
it strengthens the whole thing.
Sure does. But I don't usually don't tell people stuff like that because I want them to think, how does he do that? I'm just such a wizard of time.
We'll keep it secret, Dave.
Okay.
That'd be all right.
Then
Yeah, I
I'll
won't
just
tell
take
anybody.
Then I'll just take a couple of the grizzlies, and I'm just trying to tie kind of a silver gray minnow, and just a suggestive thing. It's not exactly an imitation of any particular minnow pattern, but if it's moved properly through the water on the surface and just diving, it looks really,
Well,
realistic.
that's so neat the way you hold both of them and tie
Yeah,
one.
and only
It just,
tie one
it just
on.
eliminates
Yeah.
looking and picking up and getting it in there.
Well, when you guys, get as old as I am, you learn that you got to save time.
I
You
just
can't jerk
hope that
around
I
and do all
do.
that. Okay. And now, see how that's on there? Okay. Now the fun part comes, and this is where a lot of people get a little bit worried, and that's tying the deer hair. And so what I want to do is take some of this deer body hair, first of all, the yellow, and I'll take a little bit of yellow here and cut it off. And this is going to form the head and kind of the collar of it. Take the yellow, and I'm going to lay it just right behind the hook eye, like that, and hold it right where I want it and flare it down.
You didn't let it spin around then.
No, it's right on the top, like that, you see. Then I take the white, do the same thing on the bottom.
So this is unusual. You're starting at the head and working backwards,
Yeah.
which is
But,
something most of us haven't seen before.
Oh, really? Well,
No,
you guys ought to come to Arkansas more often. We've been doing stuff like this for years. Now, see, I've done that. Okay, like that. The next thing I want to do is take some of the gray hair. And this is just northern deer hair dyed, kind of a light gray color. And
So
this is
you
gonna
will
be-
come north to get your deer hair, but
Well, we got deer down there, but it's not as nice as the northern deer here. You got me there, Dave. Okay, I'll shut up. Now, tie that on there like that, okay? Then I just bring the thread back to that area there, and then just with 3 fingers or a little tube, if you have a tube.
I see where we're going with this. Oh, sure.
And
You're
then I
making a
just
bullet
Kind of a
head.
bullet head, yeah.
You guys, yeah, but and depending on how nicely you bend that back, just kind of tame it back. Just keep kind of talking it. Come on, baby. Come on back. Come on back.
Now, in
Easy.
case we walk
Now look
over
where I've
there.
got my thread, Debbie. See, I've got my thread about mid-shank now.
Okay.
And I'm just going to fold that back like that. Wrap my thread around it, you see?
Now, in case
And
you
then-
missed that, I may have walked over you, but he said to pull it back with 3 fingers, or you could use a little
Just
tube,
a little
or
hollow
something
tube, like
to
a
make
little
out of a
brass
soda
tube or
straw or something like
a
that.
soda straw. Some people
And
use
just push it back.
some people use a ballpoint pen, a hollow ballpoint pen.
Sure.
And then just bend that back.
No, I have seen that. I just didn't realize where you were going with this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you
Does
were
he always?
equip
Does he always?
Sometimes, yes.
Backpedal? Oh,
Then I'm
yeah.
just wrapping this around 6 or 8, 10, 15 times like that. And you see how that yellow and white, and I've got a couple little whiskers here that I'm just going to nip off. And once we get it like that, believe it or not, most of the time's done. Now, I like to use either a little loop whip finisher like this, and all this is just a nylon monofilament on it. And just lay that on there. Of course, making a regular whip finish is difficult because you're so far back. But like this, you just wrap the thread around that loop 6 or 8, 10 times, pull the thread out a ways, cut it, and just lay this bobbin down. Then just put the thread right through that loop and pull the loop underneath the wraps. And I call that an Oklahoma, Arkansas whip finisher. Then I just cut the thread off. When I was a kid, I used to buy some stuff from Herders, and I bought a Herders whip finisher,
Yeah.
and I never could figure out how to use it.
I couldn't either.
So I decided I'm never going to ever whip finish again. And my granddad showed me that little trick with the loop to wrap
No,
rods.
I don't use the tool because I figure I can tie the fly with my hands before anybody's got their tool loaded. But
Now,
but
next thing, I just take the nylon strand and put it between the jaws of the vise.
before you do that, let me say one thing. You didn't comment on, but apparently the length of that hair is fairly important. As you're going to fold it back, you want it to come about.
Well, at least
a
far
certain
enough
way
back where it kind of
Yeah.
merges in.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought you saw that on the video. I really wasn't trying to keep it a secret. Now I'm going to reattach the thread here because I got to put my weed guard back on.
Okay.
The other end of it. Then this has already been sized, so I don't have to worry. I just stick it up through the eye, and you want to catch the bottom first, and then make sure it's sized right. Okay. Then I just take and bend it back with my finger and catch it with the thread. And I want to cant this up a little bit so it's a little easier to do. And then
Let me
just wrap
ask you
that
while
down.
you're doing that. Whenever I tie bullet flies, I often have little stubs of underhair sticking up through the folded back head.
Yeah.
Am I just not binding it down enough or clipping
You
it
don't
short
use quite
enough?
enough here or ship it down. Well, you could also wrap your thread over it so it doesn't come through. See, I've got 2 or 3 right there.
Yeah.
But normally speaking, fish don't mind that much.
Yeah.
Now, the next thing is I want to show you another type. The way to finish is just take the super glue. It needs to be waterproof super glue. Don't use, and the thicker formula the better. If it's real thin, it's a little hard to manage. But just wet about 2 or 3 inches of thread, and then just wrap that up to the head, and wait for a few seconds, maybe 8 or 10 seconds. But since we're on television, only 2 or 3. There's always
And
a
you
time
could have
thing.
done the same thing when you tied the head down, couldn't you?
Yep. Yep. I did, but I wanted to show all my whole repertoire of tricks. And if I just done the one, I
Well, we've
wouldn't
seen
have
both
to
of them now.
do that. Yeah, that's all of them. That's it. Now what do we do? You sit here and look
Let's
at
get
each
some
other.
eyes on that thing.
All right, now, what I would advise you to do is to take and coat this head over, and I'm not going to do it here because it will get all stuck up together, but coat it over with some 5-minute epoxy, just a thin coat of 5-minute epoxy over that hair. That'll keep it from breaking when it was fishing on it. Or you could use the rubber cement, but the rubber cement's not quite as durable as the epoxy. Once you get that all hardened up and everything, then we'll put the eyes on it, and just use the this real flexible rubber cement, and just take a little dab of that. Now, those holographic eyes usually come with some adhesive on the back of them, and you're tempted to go with adhesive because it'll stick to your fingers. But as soon as it gets on a feather or hair and it gets wet, it won't last long. It'll come right off. Of course, you can always put more on, and of course that just makes the the people who sell this really happy for it.
But those are really effective looking eyes.
Yeah, they're great eyes. Look at that boy. I mean, you know, an eye like that, it just, I think, really does breathe life into the little minnow. So,
Oh, yeah.
And this will stay right on top of the water. I've never seen a minnow fish that way.
And it makes just a wake. It doesn't make a pop. And I think probably people would catch more bass if they didn't do quite so much popping anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really quite silent as it goes through the
Yeah,
water.
it makes a little V wake.
Okay.
Fish it in little short strips.
The only time that a minnow makes any kind of a popping sound on the surface anyway is when it may be feeding, and normally it doesn't do that much. Usually it's just a little splash or a little V-wake. So there's the eyes on the side of it. And I've caught so many neat bass with that. And trout will hit that, sunfish will hit it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Size on that. But,
you can just see that where there's big browns feeding. And,
you know, the minute you put those eyes on them, you kind of fall in love with
you
these
really
flies.
do.
Yeah. You do too.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm fickle, but...
Yeah. Anyway, what can we say? There it is. The only thing I might do, too, is that whenever I coat the head, I'll also coat those thread wraps with a little bit of the epoxy to make those thread wraps more durable. But there's the bug.
The waking minnow.
Yeah. And you can fish it a couple ways. You can fish it with a floating line, a long leader, or you can fish it with a sinking tip, and maybe like a 2 to 4 foot leader, and you can make it dive and it'll come back to the surface. So,
Great.